Welcome to Behind the Catch Fence. I'm your host, David Hoffman. Racing in every category is pretty much back in full swing, and that includes the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Series. Now, for those IndyCar fans watching, you'll recognize this guy in a heartbeat. On the line today, we're joined by DXDT Racing's Robert Wickens, who is fresh off his first race in the series. Robert, how are you doing today?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me, David. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, we had to have you on after a pretty monumental weekend for you in Long Beach. First time in the WeatherTech series. I know the weekend didn't maybe go as you guys would have hoped for with qualifying and then, in the race and everything. But how do you feel it went from just like an execution and just comfort standpoint for you?
I think that's a two-parter. From the comfort standpoint, I feel great with the team, the XCT Racing. They do such a good job. They're new into the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, but they're no stranger to success in sports car racing. So David Askew, the team owner, has done such a great job putting just the right people in the right places, and I think they have a strong foundation to have a lot of success in the future. And ahead of the weekend for myself, going into Long Beach, I had no idea what to expect. We did a 2-day test in Sebring, which was my only 2 days in the car, of which I actually only got 1.5 days because the first morning was driven by Spencer Piggott, just making sure, doing install checks of the system and make sure that it was safe before I got into the car. So call it a day and a half, and honestly, those you know day and a half of running that I had, it was frankly like it felt amazing, but we didn't have a whole lot to compare against. We were testing right after the Sebring 12 hours. So the track was super grippy, and like we were comparing to Sebring race data. And it's like, yeah, but the track's kind of like, you don't know if the track's just amazing or if we're doing a good job because like the lap time was competitive. And yeah, so first practice in Long Beach was kind of a reality check, honestly. I was quite, I guess, flustered would be the best way to describe it. We had an issue on our installation check right at the start of the session. We lost maybe 15, 20 minutes of running. And then to stay on script, I got out of the car and Tommy got in to like, get a baseline run on the car and to make sure that we were in a good setup window. And then I was going to get back in at the end. And I got back into the car with maybe 15 minutes left of first practice, did five-ish laps, and then there was a red flag, and then got one lap before the checkered. And that was like FP1's done. And I wasn't happy with my gap to Tommy. I was like a second and a half off of him and really just felt the whole session I couldn't really calm down or find a rhythm. It's my first time on track with GTP cars. And, when I felt like for me getting up to speed, like by the time I got into the car to do my first laps, like everyone had like hot tires and they were like really into the track and they were just like flying around. And I felt like every 2 seconds I was checking my mirrors and being passed left and right by either GTPs or even other GTD cars. And I was like, well, I just need a second here to relax and like find my bearings. And then we did after FP1 and FP2. And then we just kept chipping away at it. And then long behold, by the end of free practice two, we were quickest overall in GTD, which was, I think, a happy surprise for everyone, myself included. And then going into quali, frankly, our entire outlook on the weekend changed. We went from just trying to maximize what we could, not knowing what we had. And then quickly the focus came to like, well, if we execute well, we might actually put this thing on pole and challenge for a race win on Saturday. And unfortunately, we didn't execute a strong qualifying. And it was basically down to a full team effort. We probably in hindsight, we could have done a better job getting me in track position, but then also, I think driver always has to take responsibility in that too, because you're the one driving in the traffic. They can tell you where the gaps are, and ultimately it's up to you to find it. So we we just didn't execute a strong qualifying, and then unfortunately it's a track position race, so we pretty much made our bet on Friday. And then Sunday or Saturday was almost kind of like almost damage limitation, where we just wanted to see how far up we could get. Because we knew the strategy was going to be relatively straightforward and the race itself was going to be hard to overtake. And Tommy did such an amazing job in that race. By the time he got into the car, he was pretty much the only guy that was making moves, making things happen. And unfortunately, it came at a cost, and that cost was the carbon fiber on the on the rear end of our car. But it was just cool to see. So, do I think it was a success? Yes, but like I told everyone at DXTT Racing after the race, I'm happy that we're all unhappy right now. We really wanted to I think the mood switched after free practice two, right? And I think from that point on, we all realized that we missed an opportunity instead of just kind of being happy to be there, and I think that was it was a cool thing to experience.
And you mentioned with like the lap times and running really well, once you kind of everything started to work out in a way. It was funny your PR rep Katie had sent me like the timesheet from the whole weekend, and you were like second overall in GTD for like the entirety of the weekend, like lap time wise. And this for it to be your first time in that car, obviously you got GTPs flying by and trying to just figure out like a whole entire new environment. How much confidence does that give you kind of going forward with this?
I mean, it gives me so much confidence for the future. Obviously DXTT racing, we did such a good job all weekend preparing the car, even getting the grips with the Bosch electronic braking system and integrating it into their car. Um, it's almost gone too well. When things are almost too good to be true, and you're just like, well, hang on, like, what's the holdup? Like, what's the catch here? But no, it's just been amazing, and I knew Long Beach from at least a hand control perspective of just the ergonomics and all the steering angles and how much you have to turn, like for the hairpin or for the fountain. Pretty much every corner is pretty tight. Um, I knew from that was pretty much going to be worst case scenario for me. So going to Laguna Seca next, a pretty straightforward, smooth surface, kind of smooth curbs. And, so far the only two times I've driven the car, it's basically the two bumpiest tracks on the whole IMSA WeatherTech calendar with Sebring and Long Beach. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it behaves in a fast flowing, lots of elevation type of track like Laguna Seca.
I'm curious, if you've been working with the hand control system and kind of developing that the last couple years now, I mean, if you could, uh, like with that first one, going back to that first ever system where you guys, were trying it and everything, just how was that process of figuring out what worked and made you feel comfortable, and was it that comfortable to begin with?
Well, I think every iteration of this hand control system has been a big evolution from the one previous. So from when I first joined Brian Autosport and Hyundai in TCR, the system was a fully mechanical system. So it was a bunch of I would apply the brake on a ring on the back of the steering wheel, and then a bunch of linkages would push the able-bodied brake pedal down. And then we also had a pneumatic actuator to assist me in developing pressure, because obviously what you can grip is nowhere near what you could push with a leg, right? Whether if it's your right leg or left leg, whatever the driver wants to do. So it was a good system, but it just had latencies and some inconsistency. So as a driver, it was really tough to really put the car on the limit, because you never really knew what brake system you're about to have. Sometimes you'd apply the brake and it would stop as expected. Sometimes you'd apply the brake and there'd be almost like a small delay, because with a pneumatic actuator, depending on how much pressure was in the reservoir, the delay and assistance would vary. And it took a long time to try to isolate that. And, you know, frankly, the big step forward was when we partnered with Bosch to put their electronic braking system into our Hyundai Elantra and TCR car at the end of 2024. And it was no easy task. Brian Autosport and Hyundai worked so hard getting this system developed for me, really at their own cost. So they deserve a lot of accolades and credit to getting to where we are now. But it made it into a Hyundai Elantra and TCR car in, I want to say, early April or late April of 2024. And we did maybe 6, 7, 8 straight line tests before it ever saw a racetrack, just trying to get the software dialed in. And it was obviously a steep learning curve for Bosch as well. Given the electronic braking system is no stranger to being in race cars, it's the rear braking solution in GTP and LMDH. But using it front and rear axle and then implementing it in the manner that we were doing, it wasn't as easy as just copy and paste and times it by 2, and then you have the full system. And the reason why we hit the ground running as well as we did with the Corvette Z06 GT3R is because of the hard work that was done with Brian Autosport and Bosch in the TCR. So the fact that we got it into the car and it raced 2 races at the end of 2024, it just gave everyone, I think, so much confidence to move it over into the Corvette for 2025.
And now with the new and improved type of system to where it's really kind of in a groove in a way, what do you feel is possible in your career, to drive, and is pretty much anything kind of on the table for you kind of going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think opportunities are endless with as long as I have kind of Bosch by my side and the electronic braking system that they provide. And it's just such an amazing feeling. I feel like this Corvette Z06 GT3R, the few times I've driven it now, it's the first time racing and driving with hand controls where I feel like I'm not trying to understand the braking system, like the quirkiness of it. I can just drive the car and feel the car and react to the car. And the brakes are just there, which is all you ever want from a braking system, right? Like you just want it to exist and never be a problem, right? And with our first iterations, it was constantly like when I was learning the car and the track, I'd also be learning like the traits of the braking system and having to like program in, so if like let's say I'm braking for turn one in Laguna Seca, like maybe there's a 4/10 of a second delay because of the amount of braking that I was using in turn 11, in the last corner in Laguna. And when you're traveling 200 and whatever kilometers per hour trying to brake into turn one, and your teammate says like, "Oh yeah, I brake at the 300-meter board." Like I can't brake at that 300-meter board because if I want the brakes to apply there, I actually have to start it 4/10 ish sooner. But then you're traveling 200 and something kilometers an hour. So I'm like, that's probably around the 400 maybe when I actually make the request. And then the car like takes that much time to finally slow down. Um, so like all through free practice with that first iteration of that system, I was just kind of learning my own references. You talk to your teammates after the session on like, oh, where are you braking here and there? And like it almost I stopped doing it because it wasn't productive for me. Because I actually just had to see it on data and based off of my reference, right? So it was just a really unique way to learn the car, but with the new concept that we have and the full brake by wire capacity that we have with Bosch electronic braking system and the Corvette Z06 GT3R, it's that exists. It's just in the background. And from the first laps in Sebring, I felt immediately confident in the braking system. And as we continue to work through it and work on it, it's just getting better and better. Also, as I gain confidence in the car too. So I feel like, a long-winded answer to your question. I feel like the opportunities are endless, and the beauty is this system is transferable. It can pretty much go into any race car, as long as it has kind of the real estate inside to house it all. But it's a beautiful piece of engineering, the Bosch EBS, and it's very compact for the amount of power that it can put out into the braking system. It belongs in a race car. It belongs in road cars. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what opportunities come. But, I feel like I haven't been shy in saying I'll have to do an Indianapolis 500 at some point before I get too old and slow. Um, but, I think if I can just have a long and established career in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, I think I'll be a happy driver.
And just from a driver's perspective, obviously, you've had to kind of relearn how to be a driver with the system, and then, when you upgrade the system, relearning that, like you kind of mentioned, yeah, how do you feel having to learn all these different type of systems and learning your driving style now? How do you feel you've kind of almost become a better driver compared to when you first started?
I'm definitely a better driver now than I was, before my injury. And it's not obviously from an ability standpoint. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunities that I've had while being paralyzed, while I was recovering, and being an advisor with Errol McLaren over the years, and then now with my role with Andretti Global. Um, Understanding what happens behind the scene of a race, I think, is super powerful for any driver. I never got to watch a race on a timing stand until I was paralyzed and not actually driving in the race. And you understand very clearly that, every driver has so much adrenaline when you're in the car, and sometimes things are said um, because you're just venting, but it's perceived maybe in a negative way to the team. And then you kind of just realize when you can take a step back and just kind of watch it all unfold that, end of the day, like these are human beings doing the best job that they can, and the driver's doing the best job they can. And sometimes things are said, and when you see the ripple effect of kind of how you can how a driver's comment can almost suck the energy out of the work, right? It kind of made me realize and reevaluate how I approach a problem when I'm inside the car. I really make sure to, if I'm going to say something, that it first off needs to be constructive to the situation, and then just do your best to not get worked up, which it's easier said than done. But I think I'm a more well-rounded driver now than I was in 2018. Um, but I never know. And you don't know if I would have came across, these things at some point in my career. Maybe it comes with age, but I feel like in 2018, I got pretty hot and heavy on the radio a few times about situations that, you're never proud of them after the fact. But I think when you see it firsthand happen to when you're listening to another driver do it, and then you kind of, yeah, you just see the chain reaction that it can create and how it can kind of just suck the energy or the life out of that team for that whole race or that whole session. It's actually pretty amazing to see. And I was happy that I was able to realize that.
Hmm. That's very, very interesting. And, and I've always kind of been intrigued, obviously with the accident and everything, you always kind of thinking about this from a more broad perspective. And you always hear about having grit and, always pushing forward, even when the highest of highs and lowest of lows happen and that sort of thing. Just how would you describe this for you, that inside of yourself, that even though you had that massive hurdle to go through, rehab and getting back inside a race car and all of that, just what was that feeling inside to know that you're going to make this work no matter what it takes, how long it's going to take?
I mean, I think the first thing, David, is it takes a great support system, right?
Yeah.
I feel so fortunate to have the support from my loved ones. My wife was amazing through the whole recovery. And then even from there, like the motorsport community, from the fans to fellow competitors from all over the world, it wasn't even just like IndyCar drivers. It was like the whole world of motorsport felt like it was just banding together. And um, it's a tough one. Everyone's recovery is different. Everyone goes through the highs and the lows, and you know, it really turned a corner for me when I got to Craig Hospital in Inglewood, Colorado, which is a world-renowned spinal cord and traumatic brain injury rehab facility. And when I got there, I was ready to go to work. The whole time I was just trying to recover from my injuries, and with broken limbs and basically broken everything, I couldn't even like push a wheelchair yet. So when I finally got there and I had atrophied almost 70 pounds of muscle or 60 pounds of muscle, I was just ready to just get on the horse and get going. I didn't know what my rehab journey looked like, but I knew I was in this amazing facility and I was going to make the most of it. And it was my fellow patients that kind of would keep you motivated, because I was just a patient number and there was hundreds of us all trying to achieve the same thing, which is just the best quality of life that we can get. Um, at the very beginning, racing was always on my mind, but I didn't focus on any kind of athletic training. It was all just spinal cord rehabilitation, just trying to get any neurological regeneration. And then I started getting some, and then it's just like started compounding. You almost get like excited and remotivated when something happens. But like, it's hard to put into words what it feels like when you're sitting in a hospital bed for 3 months trying to wiggle a toe and you can't do it, right? It's so easy to get down on yourself. And I think that's where my support system was just so great. I feel very grateful that I had a sports psychologist prior to my injury, and I understood how it kind of like unlocked a new level in my athletic career and how strong the mental mind, how the human mind can be. So I wanted to make sure as well that I was in a good state of mind, the best state of mind I could be. There's obviously days where I wasn't in a good state of mind. Um, and yeah, so like at Craig Hospital, like seeing the local therapist and stuff, just making sure that you're just kind of talking things through, because it's easy to get bottled up and almost get lost a little bit.
And it's such a, inspiring thing because, people complain about breaking a leg, or, or someone has a cold, or, just whatever that may be, it's just
Hey,
so,
the cold sucks. All right.
yeah, they do.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a baby with it. Dealing with it right now, but it's just so cool because, it's just, the human mind, the human body is such a really, cool thing and seeing what it can do. And now it's like maybe it's not what you would have thought of 20 years ago of where you'd be at in your career, but it's opened up a lot of doors. And I'm sure you've met a lot of really cool people in the process and made a lot of relationships and just really grown as a person as well through all of it.
Well, for sure. And, I think, like you said, I was able to kind of experience a whole new aspect of this sport that I love so much. And, if I had the choice to continue driving an Indy car from 2018 until present, obviously the answer would be yes. But, it was always on my kind of career bucket list to make my way into sports car racing and endurance racing at some point. It seems to be kind of the natural progression out of high level sprint racing as you kind of transition into the endurance racing world in the years that follow. So, in a way, I almost just skipped 5 years of my sprint career in IndyCar and just start. Hopefully, I'm now just starting the next phase of my endurance career in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship.
And a final question for me, big news from this week will be head of the Nürburgring for the 24-hour race. First time running that, just, obviously you ran it, believe it was last year. How would you describe that racetrack and what sets it apart from other venues? Because, I've like raced it on like Forza or something. You're like, this place is insane. What is that like to drive just one single lap around that place?
Uh, Twice the insanity in real life to what it is in a video game. It's amazing. It's such a rush. It's you have to be so committed around there. The track's so long and so grueling. The elevation changes, the speed, the lack of runoff. It's just like the whole way through. It's just such an awesome experience. Um, Obviously, it's common now knowledge. We tried to qualify for the race last year, and it seems like the cards were just stacked against us, right? With an accident in the first NLS race, which ruled me out of then the qualifying weekend. We tried to go back for another one, and then there was a corner worker strike, and the race got canceled while we were over there. Like I feel like we gave it every chance we could to try to do that 24 hours in Nürburgring, and we weren't able to get the permits required. So yeah, we're going over for round two, and it's just the most grueling 24-hour race I think you can do in the world. And I have a lot of friends and colleagues that have done 5, 10, more than 10 attempts at the 24 hours of Nürburgring, and they've never even seen the checkered flag, right? And I think that's kind of the beauty of the race. Anything can happen there. And, like we see it year on year, like last year, the 24 hours of Nürburgring was basically only an 8 hour race because the weather's so extreme there that like they had such dense fog and it just never lifted. There's races where there's snow, or hail, or might be raining on one side and perfectly sunny on the other, right? It's just like such a crazy race. Anything can happen. So the fact that Hyundai and Brian Hart Autosport are putting their faith in me again to give this another shot, it's gonna be great. But man, it's crazy. If you ever get a chance, at least pay your 20 euros or whatever it is and just go take your rental car out for a lap because it's the best roller coaster in the world.
I think I've seen a lot of people crash the rental cars there too, so just get a little carried away. So I'll try not to do that if we end up going there sometime. But Robert, I appreciate taking the time. You've been such an inspiration, and it's just cool to see you in this stage of your career now. And as always, I appreciate you taking the time, and maybe you'll be back on, maybe you're after a win or something like that. But yeah, I appreciate you taking the
I
time.
would love nothing more, David. Thank you.